It started with a knock on the door I wasn't expecting, and the look on the woman's face like I didn't belong in the house I had worked my whole life to buy was the beginning of everything. My name is Derek Coleman. I'm 41 years old, born and raised in Dallas, Texas. For the last 2 decades, I've worked in IT security, saving every paycheck, climbing every rung of the ladder, pushing through the kind of invisible walls most people don't even notice exist, unless they're the ones slamming into them. In May of 2024, after years of renting cramped apartments, I finally closed on my dream home. A 2-story brick house with a wide porch and a backyard big enough for my dog, Charlie, to run free. The place was in Plano, an area known for good schools, manicured lawns, and homeowner associations that run tighter than a military base. I knew about HOAs. Everybody in Texas knows about HOAs. Rules for the color of your mailbox, the height of your grass, even how many cars you can park on your own driveway. But I figured, what's the worst they could do? I'm a quiet guy. I don't throw parties. I keep my place neat. How much trouble could I get in? The trouble came in the form of Barbara Whitmore. Barbara was the president of the HOA board, a woman in her late 50s with hair the color of bleached straw and a voice that carried down the street like a car alarm. She lived 3 houses down from me, in a place that looked identical to mine except for the enormous flagpole she'd installed in her yard, something I later learned she'd fined other people for trying. From the day I moved in, Barbara treated me like an intruder. The first time I saw her, she didn't say welcome to the neighborhood. She asked me who I was there to visit. I live here, I told her, smiling, trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. Her eyes narrowed like I'd just told her a joke she didn't get. In this house? She said, pointing at the brick 2-story with the welcome home wreath I'd hung on the door. Yes, ma'am, I said, closed last week. She just shook her head, muttered something under her breath, and walked off. I didn't think much of it then. Maybe she was nosy. Maybe she was just one of those neighborhood watchdogs who think they own the street. But within days, the letters started showing up. The first one was about my garbage bins. I'd left them visible by the side of my garage instead of tucking them behind the fence. A fine, $50. The second one was about my lawn. Grass too long, she said. Never mind that I'd had a landscaper mow it just 2 days earlier. Another fine, $75. Then came a warning about Charlie, my dog. Excessive barking, the letter claimed, which was funny because Charlie barely barked at all. He's the laziest golden retriever you'll ever meet. It didn't take long for me to realize these weren't normal HOA notices. They weren't about rules, they were about me. I tried to reason with her. I attended one of the HOA meetings, sat in the little community center while Barbara presided like a queen on her throne. Every time I raised a point, she interrupted. Every time I explained myself, she rolled her eyes. When I pointed out that other houses on the block had bins out, lawns longer than mine, dogs louder than mine, she dismissed it all. You don't understand how we do things here, she said, smiling that tight smile that people use when they don't want to say what they really mean. And I understood perfectly. For weeks it went on. Letters, fines, notices. One day I came home to find a tow truck hooking up my car, claiming it was illegally parked in my own driveway. Another day, I got a notice threatening legal action if I didn't correct ongoing violations. But nothing prepared me for what happened in August. I came home from work on a humid Thursday evening to find a piece of paper taped to my front door. Bold letters at the top read, "Notice to vacate." I stood there staring at it, my briefcase still in my hand, heart pounding in my chest. The letter claimed I was in violation of residency restrictions and had 30 days to leave the property. I laughed at first, a bitter, disbelieving laugh. Vacate? My house? I pulled out my phone and called the number at the bottom of the notice, and of course, it was Barbara who picked up. "Barbara," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What is this?" "You know exactly what it is," she snapped. "You've been out of compliance since the day you moved in. This community has standards. If you can't meet them, you'll have to go." I was silent for a moment, stunned by her audacity. Then I said, "Barbara, maybe you've forgotten something important. This is my house. I bought it. I own it. You don't have the authority to evict me." There was a pause on the line, a long moment where I could hear her breathing. Then she laughed. "Let's see what the board thinks about that," she said, and hung up. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with the notice spread out in front of me, the paper trembling in my hands. I thought about all the years I'd worked, all the sacrifices I'd made, and now, in the place I'd finally thought was mine, I was being told I didn't belong. That was when I made my decision. If Barbara wanted a war, I was going to give her one. I thought ignoring Barbara would make her go away. But in neighborhoods like this, ignoring someone like her only makes them louder. Over the next few weeks, the harassment shifted from letters to something more personal. One Saturday morning, I walked out to grab the mail and found Barbara standing on my lawn, not the sidewalk. My lawn, clipboard in hand, scribbling notes like a detective gathering evidence. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep calm. "What are you doing?" She didn't even look up. "Documenting violations," I laughed under my breath. "On my property? This is HOA jurisdiction," she snapped, and finally met my eyes. "And until you learn how to respect this neighborhood, you'll keep hearing from me." That was the first time I felt it. Not just annoyance, not just frustration, but humiliation. Because the way she said it, it wasn't about grass or bins or rules. It was was about me, the way she looked at me, like I was some intruder who had slipped past the gates of a private club. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? A woman is standing on my lawn with a clipboard. I could already imagine the officer's face, so instead, I recorded her on my phone. She didn't care. She stood there scribbling, daring me to say something. When I finally walked back inside, I felt this burning in my chest, like I had lost, and it wasn't even a fight worth losing. That night, I couldn't shake it, couldn't stop replaying the look on her face, that little smirk like she'd won something. But Barbara wasn't done. The next week, I came home to find bright orange stickers plastered on my garage door. Unapproved modifications, they read. I stared at them in disbelief. Modifications? I hadn't changed a thing on the house. The bricks were the same. The paint was the same. I hadn't even hung up Christmas lights. I peeled the stickers off and threw them in the trash. But the residue stayed, leaving ugly patches of glue that I couldn't scrub off. It was petty, childish, but effective. Every time I pulled into my driveway, I saw those marks, reminders that I wasn't in control. A few nights later, I heard voices outside, laughter. I peeked through the blinds and saw Barbara with 2 other board members standing at the edge of my yard, pointing at my house, shaking their heads like I was some cautionary tale for the neighborhood. That's when the whispers started. At the grocery store, neighbors avoided eye contact. At the gas station, one man who lived just down the block asked casually if I was still fighting with the HOA. Fighting. That was the word he used. Like it was some public spectacle. Like I was a kid who couldn't follow rules. It was humiliating. Every errand, every trip outside, I felt eyes on me. I started leaving home less, working longer hours just so I wouldn't have to pull into that driveway. But Barbara wasn't satisfied with humiliation. She wanted control. The final straw came in September. I'd been out late at work, came home exhausted, and found a letter taped to my door. This one wasn't typed. It was handwritten, in Barbara's messy cursive. You don't belong here. Sell before it gets worse. No signature, no HOA letterhead, just that sentence. My hands shook as I read it. For a long time, I just stood there on my porch, the cicadas buzzing in the night, that piece of paper trembling in my hand. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about fines, or rules, or HOA standards. This was about Barbara deciding who deserved to live here, who deserved to belong. And in her eyes, it wasn't me. I knew it was only a matter of time before Barbara took things further. What I didn't expect was that she'd try to turn the entire neighborhood against me. It happened on a Thursday evening. I came home to a bright flyer taped on every single mailbox on our street. In bold letters, it read, Special HOA meeting, mandatory attendance, agenda, community standards violations at 74 Maple Drive. That was my address. I stood there in the middle of the street holding that flyer, while my neighbors quietly pulled theirs off their mailboxes too. Some avoided my eyes. Others glanced at me with this mix of curiosity and pity. I felt like a defendant walking into court before the trial even began. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday night at the community clubhouse. I didn't want to go. Every fiber of me screamed to ignore it, but I knew if I didn't show up, Barbara would twist my absence into guilt. So I ironed a shirt, rehearsed what I'd say, and walked into that clubhouse determined to defend myself. The room was packed. More people than I'd ever seen at an HOA meeting before. Barbara sat at the front, gavel in hand like a judge, with 2 board members flanking her. The way she sat there, chin high, lips pursed, you'd think she was presiding over a courtroom. Let's begin, she said, banging the gavel. She didn't waste time. One by one, she listed so-called violations: improper waste disposal, unauthorized landscaping, garage use inconsistent with bylaws. Each accusation was read like a charge in a trial. Neighbors whispered, some frowned, others nodded along, already convinced. When she finally gave me the floor, my hands were shaking. These claims are false, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I mow my lawn weekly. I follow the trash schedule. I haven't changed a single thing about the property since I moved in. This isn't about rules. It's personal. Barbara leaned forward, her smirk returning. So you're saying the board fabricated these violations? Yes, I said firmly. The room went quiet. That's when Barbara pulled out a stack of photos. She held them up like evidence in a trial. Blurry shots of my driveway, my trash bins, even my backyard fence. None of them showed violations, just normal, everyday scenes. But she narrated each one like it was damning proof. This, she declared, pointing to a photo of my recycling bin, was left on the curb 2 hours after the scheduled pickup time. A few people actually gasped. Over a recycling bin. I felt heat rising up my neck. This is ridiculous, I said. You're harassing me. Everyone here knows it. But the damage was done. Barbara had shifted the spotlight, made me the spectacle. The neighbors weren't looking at her anymore. They were looking at me, judging, whispering. One man in the back raised his hand. Look, I don't know the details, but we all chose to live here because it's a certain kind of neighborhood. If one person doesn't respect that, it affects all of us. I wanted to shout, to call out the hypocrisy, to remind them that I had paid just as much, if not more, to be here. But the words stuck in my throat, because I realized in that moment, Barbara had won the narrative. The meeting ended with Barbara announcing that the board would review next steps, but the tone was clear. She wanted me gone. I walked out of that clubhouse humiliated, my ears burning with the sound of whispered conversation conversations trailing behind me. For the first time, I thought about whether she might actually succeed, and that thought terrified me. 2 weeks passed after the meeting. 2 weeks of cold stares, tight-lipped smiles, and neighbors who suddenly stopped waving when I drove by. Barbara's campaign was working. I felt it every time I walked my dog or checked my mail. The neighborhood wasn't mine anymore. It was hers. Then one Friday morning, I came home to a paper taped to my front door. At first glance, it looked official. Bold letters, legal jargon, a stamp at the bottom. Notice to vacate, 30 days. My stomach dropped. It claimed that I was in violation of multiple community covenants, and that my right to reside at 74 Maple Drive was being terminated. I knew immediately this wasn't real. An HOA can fine you, maybe even sue you, but they can't just evict you. Still, the paper looked so authentic that any casual observer would believe it, and that was the point. Barbara wanted to humiliate me. She wanted the neighbors to see that notice, to whisper about how the troublemaker was finally being forced out. I pulled it down, crumpled it in my fist, and sat in my living room shaking with anger. I could have called the police right then, could have threatened legal action, but something in me snapped. For months I had played defense. I had explained, justified, endured. Now I decided it was time to go on offense. The opportunity came sooner than expected. The HOA held its annual open meeting the following Wednesday, a big event where residents could ask questions, review budgets, and air grievances. Barbara, of course, would be front and center. I arrived early, sitting near the front with a plain folder in my lap. Barbara walked in minutes later, wearing a blazer and pearls like she was running for office. She glanced at me and smirked, clearly expecting another easy victory. The meeting began as usual. Financial reports, landscaping updates, minor complaints. Then Barbara moved into her favorite subject, community standards violations. She cleared her throat. We've had ongoing issues at 74 Maple Drive that threaten the integrity of our neighborhood. In fact, steps have already been taken to address this matter, including a formal notice to vacate. Murmurs filled the room. People turned to look at me, eyes wide. That's when I stood up. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady. "I need to address that claim." Barbara's smile faltered. "You'll have your turn." "No," I said firmly. "I'll speak now." I walked to the front of the room, my folder in hand. All eyes were on me. "First of all," I began, pulling out the crumpled eviction notice, "this document was taped to my door last week. It claims I've been ordered to vacate my home within 30 days. But here's the problem. This paper is fake, entirely fabricated. An HOA doesn't have the power to evict a homeowner. Only a court can do that. What this is," I held it up high, "is harassment." Gasps rippled through the room. Barbara shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "And it gets worse," I continued, "because this notice wasn't just some prank. It was signed right here at the bottom by Barbara Whitman, our HOA president." I stepped closer, holding the paper out so the front row could see. The signature was clear. She didn't just harass me privately. She tried to mislead this entire community. She wanted you to believe I was a criminal, someone unfit to live here. But the truth is, I paused, pulling out the final document from my folder, a property deed. I'm not just a resident of this neighborhood. I'm the legal owner of 74 Maple Drive. This is my home, purchased, paid for, and protected by law. The only person violating community standards here is her. I pointed directly at Barbara. The room erupted. Neighbors whispered furiously, some standing to get a better look at the papers. A few shook their heads in disgust, not at me, but at her. Barbara's face turned crimson. She tried to speak, but her words tangled. This is a misunderstanding, a clerical," but no one was listening. The illusion had shattered. The woman who had spent months portraying herself as the guardian of the neighborhood was exposed as a liar, a bully, and a fraud. I didn't need to say another word. I gathered my papers, tucked them back into the folder, and returned to my seat. For the first time since moving to Maple Drive, the whispers weren't about me. They were about her. Barbara avoided my eyes for the rest of the meeting, and when it ended, she rushed out the door without saying a word. That was the last time she ever confronted me. After that night, things in the neighborhood shifted. No one came to my door with folded arms and fake smiles anymore. No more anonymous notes in my mailbox. The whispers stopped, and the stares softened into something else. Uneasy, maybe even guilty. Barbara resigned from the HOA a month later. Officially, it was for personal reasons, but everyone knew the truth. Her name had become poison in the neighborhood she once ruled. I wish I could tell you that everything became perfect after that. It didn't. Some neighbors still avoid me. Some smiles still feel forced, but at least the constant pressure, the humiliation, the manufactured battles ended. And here's the part I keep turning over in my mind. It was never really about weeds or trash cans or even that eviction notice. It was about control. Barbara saw me as someone who didn't belong. Maybe because of my skin, maybe because of my background, maybe just because I didn't fit into the little box she thought a homeowner should look like. She used every petty rule and fabricated story to push me toward one outcome, surrender. But what she never counted on was that the same dignity she tried to strip from me is the very thing I refused to let go of. Because humiliation only works if you accept it, and that's why I'm telling this story now, because Barbara isn't just one woman. She's a pattern. She's in neighborhoods, schools, offices, boardrooms. She hides behind rules, paperwork, polite smiles, and the language of standards. But what she's really doing is deciding who's allowed to exist comfortably and who isn't. And if you're listening to this, maybe you've had your own Barbara. Maybe you've had someone try to make you small, to shame you, to tell you, without ever saying the words, that you don't belong. If you take nothing else from this story, take this. You don't fight that by playing their game. You fight it by exposing the game itself. That night in the community hall when I held up that fake eviction notice, I didn't just prove Barbara was lying. I reminded everyone in that room, including myself, that dignity doesn't come from their approval. It comes from refusing to let anyone take it away. And once you do that, their power crumbles.